करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवत् व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ नमः प्रणवार्थाय शुद्धज्ञानैकमूर्तये निर्मलाय प्रशान्ताय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। Okay. Starting from this verse, na jayate mriyate va vipashchit nayam kutaschinna babhuva kaschit अजो नित्य शाश्वतोयम पुराणः न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. Shastra and the Guru have a problem on their hands. How do you explain, describe something which is vipashchit, something which is ashesha vishesha rahitaha? So one big problem for Shastra, which handles it beautifully, we will see, is how do you describe something which is got no qualities, no characteristics, nothing. The normal way we would do it is by adding adjectives to anything we want to describe in this world. A fragrant blue large lily. Many adjectives. Those adjectives qualify the substance. In this case, large, blue, fragrant are adjectives. Now, the interesting thing is that lily itself is an adjective to something else. Everything in the Jagat is only an adjective. And those we can describe because we can attach adjectives to them. Even a thought, a pleasant thought, an outreach thought, a feeling, beautiful feeling, a nasty feeling, a premonition. Everything can be described with an adjective or many adjectives. The whole Jagat is nothing but adjectives. There is no substance. Because every substance you take itself is an adjective. A pot, to go back to our standard Shastra example, is an adjective. A pot is an adjective to clay because pot is nothing but clay. A certain shape of the clay is called pot. Now, Why do you say that? Because if the pot is made of copper, for example, it is an adjective to copper, but it's still an adjective. It's a descriptive word. A descriptive word which identifies this particular object from other objects. A pot is not a table. A pot is not a mountain. A pot, when you say, the adjective comes to the mind. A certain shape, it has a neck, it can contain water. All of these things come to mind when you say pot, not necessarily clay, because it could very well be a copper pot. So what we deal with are adjectives. Now here is something which is vipashchit, which is ashesha vishesha rahitaha. How can Shastra help us understand this without the use of adjectives? Because there are no adjectives you can use there. So what does Shastra do? It uses a description which is negation. Neti, 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 you heard. Anything that you can think of, naiti. So that makes us think into the next level. That's the only way you can say, because there's no attribute. Bring that book from there. Now, he says there are many books. What do I do? Now, I don't remember the book, but I know that there are many other books lying there. I say, not the green one. Not the one on Ramayana, the other one. I have negated others and said, whatever is left, please bring that. Now here, there's nothing left that you can identify. So you already begin with the problem. And from here, Yamadharmaraja has to explain to Nachiketa this Atma. And he's got to do it in a way that Nachiketa can understand, in a way that all of us can understand. So this is problem one. How do you explain something which has no qualities, no characteristics? Qualities and characteristics can be used if it has some, an object can be used, described by using these characteristics in three different ways. Either by saying the one that has some parts. Within itself, it has some parts. One can explain it that way. Or it is part of a group, but can be characterized by its quality. In a fruit basket, there are many fruits. You want somebody to bring only the apple, the green apple, let us say. All are fruits, one jati, one set. They're all members of the same set. You can identify by identifying this as different from the others in the same. group. A third way of doing it is something which belongs to a different group altogether. If it belongs to another group, then also you can identify it by saying not the one that is a tree, but the one that is a fruit, or the one that is a vegetable. This three-way identification, swagata bhedaha, that which can be identified because its own parts are different. It has many parts. There are difference in the same part. My sharira has many parts, and I can divide it the way I want to divide it. Hands, legs, nose, or skin, dermis, epidermis, whatever. This is swajatiya bheda. There are, because it consists of many parts, you can describe it. And everything in the Jagat has parts. Because everything is nothing but an assemblage of some kind. If you want to distinguish it between the members of the same group, that difference is called Svajatiya Bheda. The difference between Vastu in the same group. Or if we just want to distinguish it with other group members, Vijatiya Bheda. These are Bheda is differences. And these differences come because of the fact that everything that we know in the Jagat has certain characteristics, certain qualities by which it can be described within itself, within its group, or between groups. That's the only way, only three possibilities. Atma has none of these. There are no characteristics. There are no qualities. How do you describe the Atma? Problem one. So to solve this, Shastra takes recourse to several methods it uses. One of the methods is it negates everything. But negating everything has a big danger. I go on negating, it's not a book, it's not an apple, it's not a thought, it's not a feeling, it's not this chair, it's not this. That negation of others is infinite. I can't keep on saying this, not this, not this. Up to some point I can say. But then some point the Shishya has to understand that this includes everything and everything is negated. Everything we know has a starting point, a creation. Everything we know exists for a period in the scale of time and then is not there. But this characteristic is not there in Atma. Therefore, we call it Ajaha. It's never born. And never dies. It is Nityam. It is not dependent on time. So every little characteristic that we can think of by which we define everything. So what this done is, this clubs everything we know, and one common characteristic about all of them is that at some point they appear, they exist, and another point they disappear. What disappears? The form disappears. The name disappears. The utility disappears. What does not disappear? The pot is today. Swamiji, when the pot gets destroyed, there's no pot. So how can you say East doesn't disappear? East doesn't disappear. Because the pot breaks into shards. Shard is. Ease never goes away. The easiness is common, it remains all the time. What about before the pot was created? Clay is. Pot is not. Clay is. After the pot breaks, pot is not. Shard is. Shard also goes mixed up, powdered into dust. Shard is not. Powder is. Never goes. East never goes. East never changes. Then what changes? The form that takes keeps changing. Ease doesn't change. So Nitya, Ajaha, Nitya, all these Shashvataha. Shashvata is also doesn't undergo any change. Avaya, there's no parts to it, therefore there's no change possible. So the way Shastra addresses this in one of the ways is by negating everything and by negating all that we know which have some one common characteristic and negating that characteristic. Then what happens? I understand Atma, even if I'm a very sharp person, I've understood everything Shastra says, and I've understood, therefore, there is something called Brahman, and that Brahman does not have any characteristics. It can be negated, it can be understood by negating every characteristic that you can think of, and those that you can't even think of, by extending my thinking. I know only X number of characters are infinite. But by understanding this, etc., every other characteristic is also understood is not being there. Then the Shastra has to take the next step, which we will see later in the further mantras. This is not the end. This is not, one cannot say, oh, I understood Brahman, I can go home. So what you understood Brahman? What does happen to you? Nothing. That there is something called Brahman, that Brahman is characterless, not characterless like we understand. He's a characterless fellow. But has no qualities, no qualification, no way of distinguishing with anything. But I still am thinking of this in third person. There is something called Brahman. That is the time when I take Brahman as Saguna Brahman. Ishvara. That also has guna. That's why it's called Saguna Brahman. But I accept certain level of infinitism, if you want, on Ishvara. Ishvara is called Bhagavan, no? Shad Bhaga Yasya Asti. Unlimited, infinite. Therefore, I assume Ishvara. Then Shastra has to take the next step. That Brahman that you understood without any quality, anything to describe it, means that there is nothing else to distinguish from there. No Swagata Bheda, no Bheda. no swajatiya bheda, no vijatiya bheda, no bheda, because there is nothing to differentiate it from. Oh, there's nothing to differentiate it from. What about me? I have understood Brahman. I am the subject, Brahman is my object. No. If you have understood Brahman, that it is Swagata, Swajatiya, Vijatiya, Veda Rahitaha, there cannot be a second. There is no possibility of a second. Then how do I understand I? In the I also, I know that there is an I and there is a body-mind sense complex, Sthula Sharira and Sukshma Sharira. So the only thing I can do at that stage, and Shastra takes beautiful method to explain that, he say that Brahman is the same as I. And what about the body-mind sense? Body, mind, sense are non-self-existing. They don't have an easiness to them. Easiness belongs to Brahman, to I. They don't have an easiness. They are only adjectives. Like a pot is an adjective. If it's a clay pot, to clay, pot doesn't exist in the clay. Pot doesn't merge with the clay. Pot is clay. I don't merge with Ishvara. Because in the first stage, I understood I and Ishvara. That I does not go back and merge with Ishvara. I is Ishvara. So at the second stage, when Shastra tries to explain to us, it will take various means. Like the first one, it is taking certain means by describing the non-describable, that which is not available for words, by using negation. Na jayate, na mriyate, vipaschit. It is neither karana nor karya. Negation. Which our Bhashyakara sums up in this beautiful phrase called Ashesha Vishesha Rahita. Then it says Ajaha, not born, Nityaha. Both indicate that there is no, it's not within a time frame. Time has dimension. To our limited mind, we look at past and say it goes to infinity. We look at future and say it goes to infinity. But this infinity that we know is Jagat, within Jagat. When we say it is free of time, it means it is not in any of these spaces. To begin with, we say it is Satyam, which is always there in the past, present, and future. But when we begin to understand, we say time itself is a product. Space is a product. So, Ajaha, Nitya, Shashvataha, one that does not degenerate. It does not degenerate because there are no parts to degenerate. That's what our Acharya said. No, what did he say? Yohi ashashvrataha sa apakshiyate. that will get destroyed slowly. Okay, now all these are covered in the body, and everything else in the Jagat goes through Jayate, is born, Vardhate, grows in some fashion, Viparinamate. Viparinamate is applicable to all sentient beings. They go through a transformation. They go from being a non-productive being to a possibly productive being. Productive in the sense of enhancing the species. Then apakshiyate. And eventually vinashyati. Everything, you can take anything and the same thing happens, including the non-tangible things. There's a sixth element which I did not cover. Asti. Asti means ease. That ease remains. Everything else is not applicable to I, the Atma, which has been represented in the previous verses by Omkara. The easiness is represented by Omkara. So he says, Yohi ashashvataha so apakshiyate. I am tu shashvataha. There is no question of any degeneration, in any way reducing it in any fashion or growing. And then it uses a word called Puranaha. Purana is an interesting word. Ramayana, Mahabharata are called Puranaha. Pura va Nava is both ancient and new. It's ancient because it's been existing for a long time. But tell me, how many times have each of us heard the stories of Mahabharata and Ramayana? How many times we've seen them on TV? Do we ever tire of that? Even recently, I was listening to Swamiji on Mahabharata. It's always interesting. It's always new. Shikara has a very nice definition of this word, Purava Nava, Puranaha. We will read that. Atayeva
अतएव
Puranaha
पुराणः
Purapi Nava Eveti
पुरापि नव
Purapi
एवेति
Nava Evaiti. Both it is can be called Pura and Nava. Yohi
यो हि
Avayavaha Apachaya Dwarena
भयः
अवयव
अपचय
उपचय
द्वारेण
द्वारेण
Vinirvartyate
अविनिर्वर्त्यते
अविनिर्वर्त्यते
Idanim Nava
इदानीं
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 नव
नवः
Kumbhadi.
यथा
यथा
कुम्भादि
कुम्भादिः
कुम्भादिः
Kumbha is a jar or a container. A kumbha is formed because of what he calls avayava apachaya dwarena. Avayava is a part, a characteristic, a feature. By the increase of a feature, it becomes new. You increase the feature of clay to include certain features which you then call a pot. So now it's something new, a new creation. A new creation because you've added some adjectives. It's new. So he says, anything which has an avayava which becomes upachaya, which grows, which is added, which is increased. That is called new. That's how we define new. Similarly, although he doesn't mention it here, he talks only about apachaya, there's upachaya, there's also apachaya. Removal of some features, some characteristic, some adjective. So pot is created by adding certain features, and pot is destroyed by removing some features. So it becomes new by adding some features. So avayava upachaya dvarena abhinirvartyate sa idanim navaha. Then it becomes new. Now it is new. And the new business is also to do with time. Atma really can be defined as being neither new nor old. It is not dependent on time. It is Trikalatita. Fortunately, in a situation like this, we say it is. Really, we should all be saying, I is. There is nothing else. Upachaya dvarena abhinirvartyate sa idanim navaha. It is new. At the same time, tad viparita
Tadviparita
tu
Tu
atma puranaha
Atma
Puranaha
vriddhi vivarjita ityarthaha.
Vriddhi
Vritti
Vivarjita
Vivarjita
Ityarthaha.
Ityarthaha.
There is no vriddhi. There is no addition of features, so it never become new. There is no vriddhi. How does something become old? Some changes keep taking place. The sharira is new when it's born, newborn. And then a lot of vriddhi takes place. And vriddhi takes place, vriddhi takes place, vriddhi takes place, vriddhi takes place. Teeth come and get added, new. Then teeth follow, vriddhi. Lot of hair in the head, new. All the hair follow. Everything changes. No janma, no vriddhi, no viparina, no apakshaya, and no mrityu. So you can only say it by negation. Therefore, because of all these words, ajaha, nityaha, shashvataha, na ashashvataha, puranaha, all those words are used to try and make us understand the nature of Atma. Given all this, na hanyate anyamane sharire. When the sharira goes, all the time we understand that this Atma resides in the cave of the heart. That's an expression that's used. It is in the sharira. But what is in the sharira? Not Atma. Atma is everywhere. Atma is what produces space. Atma is what space is dependent upon for its very existence. So how can you say there's a specific space where Atma is? You can't. So how do I understand that? When it says it is in the cave of the heart. Nihita guhayam. It is the place where the understanding, this understanding of the Atma takes place. This guha of the heart, they say, also means the buddhi, the thinking capacity, the understanding capacity. It is the place, the locus where this understanding can take place. So all the descriptions about Nihita Guhayam, Angushtamatram, space of the size of a thumb, all those are only expressions. But what it really means is where the location where one can understand Atma. Therefore, na hanyate anyamane sharire. Because of all these descriptions, despite the fact that we are told that it is in the Sharira, and we understand it as that locus in which you get an understanding of the Atma, Atma is everything. Space is a product of Atma. Therefore, it is Tad Viparita to Atma Puranaha Vriddhi Vivarjitaha Ityartaha. There was Navava Purana. Yata evam
यत एवम्
atah na hanyate
न हन्यते
हिंस्यते
न हिंस्यते
अन्यमाने शरीरादिभिः
अन्यमाने शरीरादिभिः
शरीरे
शरीरे
असस्थोपि
ततस्थोऽपि
आकाशवत् एव.
आकाशवत् एव.
Therefore, this can neither do anything. The hanyate is a hanana kriya, kill anything. And this particular verse, Bhagavan used very effectively with Arjuna. Na hanyate. If you understand the reality of I, Atma, you don't kill anything. Na hanyate. And if you really understand the reality of the Atma, if you have had to die in the war, what is dying? Only your body. You are never dying. Because this is na jayate, na mriyate. Because of all these things, with there's no qualities, no characteristics, no parts, and therefore, yata evam ataha na hanyate. It doesn't kill anything. It cannot. The next verse is very beautiful. In the Bhagavad Gita, these two verses are reversed. But here it will lead you into the next verse automatically. Na hanyate. Does not kill. Na himsayate, Acharya says. Nite is an extreme form of himsa. Na himsayate. Na hanyamane, sharira adibihi hanyamane. Sharira will get destroyed. Atma is untouched. Why do you have to talk about Sharira and Atma? Atma is everything. In fact, Atma is nothing. None of these. But everything is Atma. Everything is Atma because their easiness depends on the Atma. They don't have an easiness of their own. They don't have an existence of their own. Why do you then talk about it? He says, tatas tatahapi. Sharire, in the Sharira, although we are told the Atma is in the Sharira, Hey, Atma is not in the Sharira. Atma is in the Sharira. Sharira is also in the Atma. But although we are told like that becomes only to understand where the understanding takes place. But Atma, Akashavat, all pervasive. Idam sarvam tataha. Again, words have their limitation. When I say idam sarvam tataha, it will go, okay, space is there, within the space, everywhere Atma is there. No, space is in the Atma. But what purposes of expressing it is, tataha, even though it is in the Sharira, it is said to be in the Sharira. Even then, when the Sharira dies, Atma doesn't die. What is in the Sharira? At least what we feel is in the Sharira. Only a so-called reflection of the Atma. Why not? Only some kind of a pratibimba. That pratibimba in reality is only the Atma, but because this Sukshma Sharira is there, the pratibimba seems to be there, and therefore there is sentiency, therefore there is life, there is action, there is everything that happens after that. I remember one lecture, I think Viditatma Nandaji, talking about this reflected Atma is not the real Atma. Chidabhasa. Jagdishanji likes that word. Chidabhasa. It is Chidabhasa. So he says, if you are in a hotel room and the room is full of mirrors, and you see a reflection, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reflections of yourself, you want a cup of coffee, you're not going to order coffee for 6 people, you're going to order only for one. Others are unreal. Others are only images. Millions of them, billions. But their reality is, their truth is, their tattvam is only Atma. That is how we start describing the Atma. An indescribable Atma, Yamadharmaraja starts to describe to Nachiketa. That easiness which can never change. What can change is the form. When a person says, I did something, the imputation is Atma did. Atma doesn't do anything. But that's the implication. And this is a subject which the next verse deals with. The kartrutvam and bhoktrutvam of our mistaken superimposition on the Atma. We will look at that in the next class. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaaya Purnamevavashyate Om
Om
Shanti
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 Shanti Om
Hari
Hari Om
Hari
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha
Hari